our continued effort to explore the intricate layers of Indo-Tibetan relations, border culture, and Himalayan identity. We are delighted to feature insight from Dr. Devendra Kumar, Associate Fellow at the Center of Excellence for Himalayan Studies, Shiv Nadar Institute of Eminence, Delhi NCR. Dr. Kumar, a political science scholar from the University of Hyderabad, brings deep expertise in Chinese and Tibetan studies. Having studied Chinese at 𝐓𝐈𝐿U Hyderabad and Tsinghua University, Beijing, and Tibetan at Tibet House, New Delhi. His research spans career management in China's ethnic regions, linkage between domestic politics and foreign policy, and the dynamics of China's borderland. The following questioner seeks his perspective on the historical, cultural, and Indo-Tibetan border, exploring shared heritage, identity, and India's approach to preserving its borderland narratives. So welcome to the show, sir. Welcome to the Voice of Kinnaur.
Okay.
Can you tell us about Indian historical and cultural identity along Indo-Tibetan border, and what should be the Indian approach to showcase this identity?
That's a very important question, and it's India's historical and cultural identity along Indo-Tibetan border is deeply tied to centuries of exchange between Indian subcontinent and Himalayan world and Tibet. So when we are looking at India's historical and cultural identity across Himalayas, we do have sub-regional distinctions in terms of, so for example, ranging from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh, we do have sub-regional differences and distinction. But the historical and cultural identity in the Himalayan region are shared with, by Tibetan Buddhism, ancient trade networks, trans-Himalayan cultural exchanges. So we have different areas of, connections. For example, trade and pilgrimage routes have been very strong, connections. Spread of Buddhism is another example. Then we also see India's historical and cultural identity in Himalayan region in terms of shared artistic and architectural traditions. For example, many monasteries in Himalayan region, both in Tibet and Indian Himalayas, they have Indian architectural and artistic, influences. And many, frescoes in monasteries in Indian, Tibet.
Okay.
And in Indian Himalayas as large have Kashmiri and other, influences in their architecture and murals, painting, etc. Right?
Okay.
Then we also see there's syncretic amalgamation of religious and cultural practices. For example, in many in Buddhist cosmology, in many parts of Himalayas, Hindu deities, local Himalayan Hindu deities are integrated into Buddhist cosmology, right? And therefore we see a lot of amalgamation and syncretic practices in Himalayan, festivals such as Losar and others which are celebrated across Himalayas and Tibet, right?
Yes.
And in terms of living traditions also, we see Indian historical and cultural influences. For example, the shared the similarities between languages, Tibetan, Ladakhi or Bhoti or Mompa or Tibetan languages or other Tibeto-Burman languages, within this family, we see a lot of similarities between Indian Himalayas and Tibetan sites. Right? Then we see crafts, which are Thangka painting is one example. Tibetan traditional medicine is one has had big influence from India, right? Then monastic education is another living tradition which have been broken after 59, it has been broken completely by the end of 20th century. So how India can strengthen and showcase these aspects, there are different aspects. For example, there have been some efforts. For example, we have seen a Silk Route circuit of Sikkim, which tries to revive the idea of Silk Route, the ancient connections in terms of trade routes, heritage, etc. But we need to do more, right? People from the reason to write, articulate about a lot of things that we are talking about India's cultural and historical influences in the region. Yeah.
It is really informative. How did Indian monks, scholars, and traders contribute to the Tibetan civilization historically?
Traders have played a foundational role in shaping Tibetan civilization, especially in the realm of religion, philosophy, culture, and trade. So, from the 7th century onwards, Indian masters, Buddhist masters such as Padmasambhava, Santarakshita, they traveled to Tibet, where they introduced Buddhist teachings, established monastic traditions. For example, Santarakshita was the one who helped found Tibet's first monastery in Sami in southern Tibet, in Loka, right?
Yes.
While Padmasambhava integrated Indian tantric practices with indigenous Tibetan beliefs, which laid the groundwork for Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism, right? And Indian scholars have also translated Sanskrit Buddhist text into Tibetan, creating a vast set of collections that has preserved Buddhist philosophy and science for centuries. These histories are part of local community history, which are living tradition and which need to be revived and conserved. Alongside monks and scholars, Indian traders have also facilitated not just economic exchange but also transfer of ideas and technologies across Himalayan trade routes. They have brought goods like spices to they exported goods like spices, textile, manuscript to Tibet while carrying back Tibetan wool, salt, and medicinal herbs, right? And these commercial interactions have strengthened cultural ties and helped spread Indian art, script, and knowledge systems, which we can see, for instance, in the adoption of Indian script for Tibetan language, right?
Yes.
Through spiritual guidance and material exchange, through trade, etc., Indian monks and traders together have deeply influenced Tibetan religion, learning, and cultural identity, in which we see in terms of when we are talking to Tibetans who are coming from Tibet, they also have a strong awareness about India's culture, tradition, and philosophy, and Indian way of thinking. And once left, I'll give you one example to showcase that the Tibetans who are coming from Tibet to India, they take very short time to adapt to Indian ways of doing things, Indian ways of thinking, culture, and life, right?
Okay. And come to the next, sir. What culture or linguistic similarities exist between Indian border communities and those across the border in Tibet?
Yeah, so communities living along India-Tibet border on the Indian side in regions such as Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, and Tibetan side, and what Chinese administrative province is called Tibet Autonomous Region. They share deep cultural and linguistic similarities rooted in, again, centuries of contact through trade and shared Buddhist traditions. Both communities on both sides follow Tibetan Buddhism, celebrate festivals like Losar, and maintain similar monastic traditions and architectural styles, aesthetic taste. Then monasteries such as, for example, if you look at monasteries in Tawang and Lhasa, Dripu Monastery in Lhasa, they exhibit similar designs, rituals, artistic motifs, right? Which reflect a common spiritual heritage.
Okay.
Transcends modern political boundaries that divide Indian Himalayas and Tibetan Himalayas. So linguistically, if you look at the Tibeto-Burman language families, these border communities, for instance, Bhoti language spoken in Ladakh and parts of Himachal Pradesh is closely related to classical Tibetan, right, which allows speakers of both languages mutual interfaces. Likewise, you have traditional songs, chants, oral literature in these regions, which have phonetic and tonal patterns which are similar, right?
Okay.
Even everyday lives, you have customs from clothing to food habits and the way we look at the world. All these things show similarities between the communities living along the Indian and Tibet border. Yeah.
we can say we are exchanging the culture and relations.
Yeah, so if you talk to the people who are visiting Kailash, Mansarovar,
Yes.
or they'll find lot more similarities in the way people are living, the way people are thinking about the world, their connection with nature, etc. Then, and again, I'll give you the same example that Tibetans who come to India, they find lot more similarities because of these, cultural and linguistics and religious similarities, which provide basis for a shared worldview. Yeah.
Okay. What is historical significance of Minsar for India, and why asserting or redeeming Indian rights over places like Minsar along Indo-Tibetan border is important for India?
Minsar is a village which is located near Mount Kailash and Lake Mansarovar in western Tibet, which holds deep historical significance for India due to its long-standing cultural, religious, and political connections with this region and the village. And this village was traditionally an Indian enclave, a sovereign space established by Kingdom of Ladakh in the 17th century, which was to maintain and fund Hindu and Buddhist religious activities at the sacred sites of Kailash and Mansarovar. And look at the historical records which tell us that during the 1684 treaty between Ladakh and Tibet, the area was explicitly retained by Ladakh, right, which allowed pilgrims and monks to sustain the temples and trade routes there. And even after Ladakh's later incorporation into the Dogra Kingdom and subsequently the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, Minsar continued to be regarded as a traditional Indian possession. It symbolized India's historic religious rights and administrative presence in the sacred Kailash Mansarovar region. Though today it lies autonomous region, Minsar remains significant in Indian historical and cultural memory as an evidence of centuries-long old Indian link to Mount Kailash, right? And how does India assert its rights over this? I mean, it is of course difficult at this moment because of the nature of the things that states in the modern period look at these ancient cultural connections. But I think that India and China can work together to, create some flexible means whereby people these places. And beyond that, I think it will be much difficult, even though India has a very strong cultural and historical connections to this place.
Okay. On the basis of your visit to China, can you tell us about the that China really lived up to the expectations, or there is a different reality on ground? What was that exactly?
Okay, so I have not visited border areas as such, but from my experiences of living in China in general, traveling through the country, of course, there is difference between what is officially articulated in terms of their achievements in development, cultural heritage, conservation in border areas. Of course, there is a wide gap, and that gap translates. It is because of the difficulties that Chinese state has found over a period of time to penetrate into deeper into the borderlands. And there are a lot of barriers to it, because traditionally for a long time China did not have physical connectivity to the border areas, right? And especially most of the Tibetan areas, except the flat lands in plains, relatively flat lands in southern Tibet and cities. Communist Party did not have much of a presence in border areas, which it is trying to now penetrate deeper through various means. For example, building 𝐓𝐈𝐁 villages, relocating population in concentrated settlements. But there is still long way to go before it has decisive control and presence in these borderland areas. And in the meantime, the communities which are living in these areas, they will continue to look at India favorably in terms of shared religious, cultural, and linguistic heritage, and centuries of which have been shaped by centuries of connections, but were broken after China entered into Tibet in 1950 and after 59 decisively.
Okay.
Wow, what an insightful conversation with Dr. Devendra Kumar. From ancient culture bonds to today's geopolitical realities, his thought truly opened up new ways to see the Indo-Tibetan border, not just as a line on the map, but as a living story of shared identity, history, and heart. It reminds us that these mountains don't just divide, they connect us through traditions, languages, and countries of spiritual exchange. So, as we wrap up today's session, let's keep that spirit alive of understanding, curiosity, and cultural pride, because borders may define geography, but it's people, stories, and knowledge that truly define a nation. Stay tuned for more conversation, more perspective, only here at 88.4 FM, Voice of Kinnaur, your land, your voice.